You know the Magna culture, right? Nobody works for me. You people work with me. I'm working for you. The history of mankind has always been dominated by the golden rule. Here's the gold makes the rule. But I don't want to be dominated by anyone. If I feel that strong, I should not be able to dominate somebody either.
We're joined by Frank Stronach, businessman, billionaire, but, well, most importantly, a philanthropreneur. That's right, a man who understands business impact with purpose. Join with me right now live. We're going to talk not just about his journey as an entrepreneur, someone who's been celebrated, revered, respected, and admired worldwide for having started a business, Magna International, having erected well over 400 factories in nearly 200 countries, employing nearly 250,000 people. He has shifted seismically the underpinnings of what it means to be a responsible entrepreneur. With me now, Frank, we're going to dive deep into a conversation, not just about your background, your history, but more importantly, your purpose, your legacy, and perhaps, if we can get there, your stand for all Canadians nationwide. First and foremost, friend, so good to see you.
Okay, that was quite some nice comments,
Richard. It's all downhill from here.
Yeah, Richard, what you made, I couldn't have done it better, the way you described Magna. But anyway, it's great to be here, Richard, and, I hope you have a lot of questions, and only via questions can we come forward to solutions.
And I love that you said that, Frank. As we sit here in this courageous conversation, it's really nice that we can actually have a great conversation about how we can, dare I say, make Canada greater again in such a way where we see billionaires south of the border now stepping into leadership roles. We've seen with this new Trump administration, real bold steps being taken to really recover the great American economy. But these are principles you've stood for decades. Where I want to start with is your rationale, the birthplace for how you came up with a new economic charter. Where did that start for you?
Well, basically, life, everything, the most important thing subject is the economy. It's the economy. And pretty well all politicians, all business people, and pretty well all people agree, if the economy doesn't work, nothing else will work. If the economy doesn't work, we cannot feed the hungry. We cannot look after the most fragile people, the elderly, the sick, and the handicaps. So it's the economy. And it's amazing. We don't talk about it, what drives the economy. That's amazing. It's the most important subject.
Well, it's a big undertaking. I think what's happened now as we observe, Canadians like me, maybe a little bit older, maybe a little bit younger, are opening the fridge and noticing that there's less things to eat, or it costs more to put things in there. When we look at what's at the cause of our own economic strife, the challenge that Canadians are facing, how much would you agree that at the heart of it, politics, politicking, politicians, or the system itself might be part of the blame?
Well, again, as I said, we don't talk about the most important subject, the economy. We just don't talk about it. So how come, right? So, but as I see it, if the economy doesn't work, nothing else will work. But we should really think about it. What drives the economy? The economy is driven by three forces: smart managers, hardworking employees, and investors. All three have a right to the outcome. The message I want to get across loud and clear is, if without workers, you can't make a profit. So I guess the success of Magna really was supplied by that we had a corporate constitution with where it says that the employees get 10% of the profits over and above their wages. So when we put that structure in place, our profits were up 40% the first year, 100% the second year, and 200% the third year. So the message I want to get across again is when you let workers participate in a tangible way, that they get a portion of the profits, that releases an energy of untold proportions.
Well, what's amazing is that research would show that Magna's market cap is well nearly $30 billion annually. So clearly what you did and how you did it for Magna works. It keeps people employed. It keeps that economy going. And so when you reference these charters, the economic charter, the commercial charter, the employee rights charter, these are all underpinnings of a whole new ideology, a philosophy that served Magna very well, in that industry very well. How much of those things you created at Magna is being leveraged in your thinking and ideology for these economic charter of rights for Canadians?
So basically, when we look back in history, society came a long way from the caveman to the hunted, to the kings and the servants. And now the way I see it is we have bosses and disgruntled employees, and that just won't work. So we gotta devise a system where we keep employees happy. Employees know that the playing field's not level, that it's slanted for the very rich.
Well, and it's interesting because as I look at some of your research, one of the sound bites that I have here, and I love to reference it, and you've stated this, that nearly 40, 50, 60 years ago, there were less regulations and the living standards were 40 to 50% higher than they are right now. In fact, during a time I spent with you, when you opened your first shop, it was simply a function of putting out a sign and saying open for business. There were no permits and bureaucracies and such. How much do you feel these regulations have not only stifled the entrepreneur spirit, but has also made the cost of living, in fact, likely greater?
Well, again, we always refer to free enterprise. We're getting further and further away from free enterprise. Basically, without free enterprise, though, there won't be a free society. That means society is now tied up in so many regulations and red tape that it really doesn't work. So we got to take a look. So we should learn from historic examples. So I could say when I started, let's say, my first factory in Canada, about 65 years ago, I rented a small building. I put the sign up, tool and die making, open for business. I didn't go any place. I didn't need a permit. It was great. Everybody was helpful. Canada was a great place. And the living standards were so much higher than they are now because usually housing, to have a shelter is a very important aspect. So it's practically impossible now for a young couple to buy a house. 50, 60, 70 years ago, it was easy, right? He only needed one breadwinner to afford a house. So I think our living standards gone down about 50%. So we have to ask ourselves, how come?
Well, and this is what you mean by talking about free enterprise. It's a function of shifting our relationship to the standard of life. Greater standard of life, where, as you've said, if you can't feed the hungry, if you can't take care of the old, if you can't take care of those in need or in dire straits, then you've got yourself a very unhealthy economy, which you would argue, and I want to see if you would agree, you're not operating with a free enterprise.
No, we're way up. Free enterprise means usually countries with the lowest bureaucracy have the highest living standards. The more bureaucracy you have or regulators, the lower the living standards. So we got to take a look. Do we need all that thing? Look, when a couple gets married and they have children and they worry very much how should we raise them? You cannot lock them up in a rubberized room, right? You gotta let them out, right? Yes, good parents will caution them, but don't go swimming in shark-invested waters, or don't climb up on the highest trees, etc., etc. But basically, you gotta let them grow up, right? The way life is, and it's unfortunate. And sometimes we ask ourselves, is there a God? Let's say if a young kid climbs up the tree, falls down, and breaks its back, right? So, but that's that's the way the universe is. That's the way life is, right?
Well, I think as a parent myself, and you would agree as a grandfather, I think sometimes the rubber room would have been smart for me to put myself in rather than putting the children in. But with all kidding aside, I mean, as you talk about bureaucracy, we've talked a bit about the shape of different economic thinking, like from communism to capitalism. And at the center of it all, you always reference, it's one of your go-to statements, the golden rule. What's the golden rule, Frank?
The golden rule is, there's only one golden rule. The people or the person which has the gold makes the rule. Okay, that is, the world has always been dominated by the golden rule and still is. Now, years ago or centuries ago, when the king had his castle up the hill and he taxed the farmers too much, he had revolutions, right? Sometimes the farmers won, sometimes the king won. But now you don't see the kings no more. They might be in Hawaii, they might be in Beverly Hills, they might be in Monaco, but they are there. I would call it the elite. The elite doesn't want to share the profits with the working class. That's the dilemma. So the very key is, how can we dismantle the chains of dominations? Not via violent revolutions, destructive revolutions, only via revolution of the mind. And the revolution of the mind would be to adopt an economic charter of rights.
Well, it's interesting, just to take it a step back. What we're talking about right now is how there's a little bit of a calling to arms that you're leading, where every Canadian should step up and lean into the idea that we all deserve a chance at having a free enterprise-minded economy. Thus why you wrote the economic rights, the economic charter of rights, a new way of really freeing up our small business owners to do what they're built to do and do it better than they have. At the center of this conversation, you've talked about two things. It would sound like there's a financial psychology, but there's also a little bit of a true psychology. I reference here one of the statements you once made. It said that the world is dominated by two economic systems. You said the communistic system, driven by Russia and China, and the capitalistic system, driven by the United States. How do you now see this ending up, given what's transpiring in the world?
Well, we have to realize the world has been, for the last 150 years, has been dominated by the United States. But it's not. It doesn't quite happen then anymore, right? Because about 50 years ago, when Wall Street was pushing business, you got to make more profits, and unions were pushing business, we got to have higher wages. So business took the easy way out, and they went to China, right, with all the technologies. So now I think we have to worry about it, or we have to think about it. Who do we want to be ruled by? Do we want to be ruled by the communistic system or the communistic system, right? When you take a look at the communistic system, you got to see about 10% of the population is the military. And another 10% of the population is what I would call the super bureaucrats. And those 20% control the 80%. In very strict rules, they line out. If you step over that line, you have a problem. So basically, that system, you have very little freedom, right? Very little freedom. And when we look at the history at society, people died for freedom. They gave their life for freedom. So the capitalistic system is when we realize that about 1% 50% of the wealth in the United States. There's a little better statistics in the United States than there's in Canada. But the statistics show that about 1% in the United States owns about 50% of the world. So basically what that boils down to, 1%. That's the 99%. You got all the freedom in the world. You got also the freedom to be hungry, right? And to a kid in inner city Detroit, freedom has very little meaning. It's only his freedom to be hungry. So we got to take a look at that system.
No, and it's great. You know, historians, economists, folks who've been covering your story for a very long time, I included, we've all observed that you've been a champion, an ambassador, the advocate for free enterprise. It was demonstrated by just how you treated all those that worked at Magna. You had your stakeholders, the shareholders, you had your managers you treated as partners, and employees had an equitable interest in the upside of all things Magna. People, again, historians and economists alike, would say that, Frank, you knew how to treat people well. So it begs the question, how did you lead to the decision to selling your stake in Magna? As it was working, you were the founding father of its principles, its thinking, and its ideology, and its success. What led you to doing that, given all of what's going on in the background?
So basically, I've been exposed to a lot of things. Like as a kid, I was exposed to the Nazi regime, and in hindsight, when you look back, you got to say, how come something like that can happen? And then I still was a kid, just finishing school. I was born and raised in Austria, so we were occupied by the Russians. So I was exposed to the communistic regime, right? And then I wanted to see the world, and I didn't have that much money. I had to go someplace where I also could get a working visa, and I applied to a lot of visas. I remember down to South Africa, Australia, the United States, and Canada. And sometimes I'm a little tough on the Canadian bureaucracy, but I'm saying they're still the best. They came forward with the visa. So I wound up in Canada, and like I said, I was exposed to a lot of systems, right? When my first 3 years when I was in Canada, the first 1 or 2 years was pretty tough. There were times when I was hungry not because I wanted to lose weight. I was hungry because I had no money to buy food.
Well, but you knew what it took to work hard, to go out there and hustle, as you would say. But again, I get back to the same question. All these years later, you're looking at the history books. You paid yourself $100,000 a year. There were some years you'd made on average $50 million just in your own distributions. By all accounting, you were a billionaire, very young, and for a long time. When did you decide it was smart for you to sell out of Magna?
Well, when we're young, we all hustle to make some money so that we can live in dignity. I could live in dignity. I had factories in 34 different countries. I chose Canada. Canada is just a great country, still a great country, except we have neglected the economy. So we gotta. I want to caution. I want to highlight, because as I stated before, if the economy doesn't work, nothing else will work. So and we have to realize that if you're not economically free, you're not really a free person, and it's a shame that such a small amount of people are economically free. So we got to ask ourselves, how come? We advanced in technology, we advanced in so many things, but we're going backwards. So that's the question, how come and what?
So I say this only as a fan and a friend. It sounds to me that at some particular point, is it possible that you felt maybe being at the helm of Magna was a form of shackle? It was a form of a weight that it actually prevented you from making the difference, maybe making an impact, doing the other things that you were passionate about doing without restraint. Would that be fair?
Well, let me point out, because I mentioned economic freedom. And I said, it's a shame that so few people are economically free. And so I should elaborate. What would be the minimum standards of being economically free? I'm saying if a Canadian woman or a Canadian man worked for 30 years, they should have enough saved up that they own their own little house or condo, mortgage-free. And they should have at least $300,000 in the bank so they could supplement their pension fund and that they can choose the road to happiness in their later years. Those would be the minimum standards, right? So we got to take a look. How come that isn't so? That's why I like to talk to you about and answer the question that how can Canadians have a better life, a higher living standard?
But that's you hit it now, Frank. It's about standards. I feel like it kept you up at night. I think it still does. I think you know that you had a great life. You knew that you did very well, and you did by very many other people very well. And it sounds like to me you're starting to challenge the status quo. Just consider you a member of the board for NASDAQ, number of publicly traded companies. And according to some parts of your bio, you even sat on many boards for universities, but have begun to challenge just what these universities are up to. Is this true?
Well, it's, again, when you get older, sometimes you sit back and say to yourself, what's the purpose of life? I think everybody should have a purpose. It might be smaller purposes, bigger purposes, but we should have a purpose. But looking back, when I was on the board of university, I think about 8 universities down in the States, in Canada, and in Europe, and I gave a lot of lectures from Harvard right across the States, right across Canada, right across Europe. So I was very critical about myself, right, and say, Frank, when I looked at from time to time, we look in the mirror. When I looked in the mirror, I say, Frank, you're not as sharp as you thought you were, right? Then I asked myself, how come? Why? Well, I missed what is the purpose of a university. The purpose of a university is to teach young people how can we have a more civilized society. But its main purpose should be to look for structures, to search for structures which would lead to an ideal society. We have absolutely no blueprint. We have nothing written down what would be an ideal society. It shouldn't be that difficult.
You know, I'm curious because you've got a smile out of me as I can only help but picture you in front of a mirror having a conversation in your mind saying, gosh, Frank, you're not as sharp as you once were. I would love to have been in that room when you had that conversation in your mind. And I say that as your dear friend. But, you know, as you look not so far back in history, there was a moment where you became a sitting member of the parliament of your home country, Austria. And I recall that you gave your acceptance speech of the seat. And about 30 days later, you gave your exit speech to that seat. Aside from that experience, how much of being in that role gave you some ideas around the ideal society, would you say?
Well, sometimes if you be on the other side, things look a little different, right? And sometimes you want to learn about it, and it's easy to criticize the politicians because politicians are strapped or prisoners of the system, right? They can't. It doesn't. So I just wanted to be in Parliament and to have a better understanding. So I let the people know because I had such a high standing because I built so many factories in Austria, was the largest employer, right? And so I had high standing with the thing, and I knew if I run for thing, they would vote for me to be in Parliament, right? So I just said, look, I want to have a better understanding. So like you said, I gave an acceptance speech, and I gave a farewell speech after 1 month. And said strong words will follow, but basically, I let the people to know beforehand that I only will be in for a short period of time because I thought my strength was the economy, and I could do more in the economy. But again, I said to the people, I learned it that months, and I know enough now how Parliament works that I could step out and do what I know best, which is the economy.
Was there a standout moment for you when you ran for office? I'm just curious to know, when you ran for office, is there one standout memory for you in that whole experience?
Well, yes, I sympathize, for politicians. Sometimes when you knock on doors and you say this, occasionally you knock on a door and you get some pretty nasty words thrown at you. So, but that's part of it, right? So, but it's a good experience, right? I think I have a little better understanding how Parliament works.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think for those who watch you speak, they watch your videos, they watch you as a part of incredible interviews and documentaries. A lot of folks really want to know who you are financially. Of course, there's always obvious curiosity for billionaires who went from having $200 in their pocket to becoming a multi-billionaire. So with your permission, I want to ask you a few questions that we have prepared for you around your financial life. Is that fair?
That's fair,
okay, good.
Yes.
Because inquiring minds want to know. Like number one is that when you sold Magna, it was reported that you sold about $800 million worth of shares. What was the first thing you did with that money?
Well, again, my lifestyle changed a bit. My ideas, what life should be, the purpose, etc., etc. I wanted to be like, I was involved in the automobile industry, and again, I just want to highlight again in a short way. I started in a small garage and built up a company with 180,000 employees and over 400 factories in 34 different countries. So I was involved in something where I know the carbon monoxide, right? I said the large cars, something isn't quite right. And I said, I'm involved in something which isn't right. And I don't want to be a hypocrite and anything here, because we got to take a look. When you go in the cities, when you sit in the traffic jams, people every day, they spend a few hours in traffic jams, right? And many thousands of people, right? And to inhale the carbon monoxide, it's just one of the worst things you could do. So I asked myself, do I want to be part of that? So I decided I thought I was blessed with a good mind and good health, and I said, gee, can I serve society better doing something else? I decided I went into the agriculture because I thought food is very important.
Well, by the way, your food is delicious. I mean, Frank's organic table, it's been and has remained to be an incredible thing. You've got a network of farms. I mean, people even know you having been a great investor in horse race tracks. Now, at one point, you were probably the largest privately held owner of land, real estate inside of city centers for quite some time during your realm and absolute glory days of Magna. Can you explain your logic behind investing in horse racetracks?
Well, again, I want to come back to that I went very heavily in the agriculture and produced food. But since I do horses, I do like a lot, and you kind of make remarks on that. I'm happy to explain. I really see. When I started out, the first 5 years, I worked about 12, 14 hours every day, 7 days a week, right? After 5 years, I had a little money in the bank. I didn't have to worry anymore to be hungry. So I said, gee, I do so much technical stuff. I wanted to be a little closer to nature, and I like cowboy movies. And when John Wayne was riding out in the sunset, I said, gee, maybe I should take weekends off and buy myself a horse. So I looked in the newspapers, horses for sale. I went to the first farm. I bought the first horse that I saw, and I was riding in the afternoon jumping.
Do you remember the name of that first horse?
Yeah, Daniel. You always remember, you always remember the first name.
The first horse.
The first girl you fall in love with, the first horse you have, right?
Good horse.
So, and anyway, that farm had a few race horses. That's the first time I went to the racetrack, and I found it fascinating, right? And so as I got more and more involved, I eye candy, and this was around the time when I started I want to be in the large car business. So I kind of, I would like to be involved with horses, maybe having horse race tracks, etc., etc. So I started to buy some horses, and then I was lucky. I had some champions right early to begin with. I started to buy race.
Ghost Zapper. Ghost Zapper is one of them.
Ghost Zapper came my first one of the first two horses I had was a filly called Glorious Song. Beautiful name. And she was a champion filly in North America and the world, right?
Wow.
Okay. So anyway, I found that fascinating, but then I said, gee, that horses provided such great service to mankind, and we're neglecting horses, right? Horses plowed the fields, you move people around, moved food. Man, it's that horses are the best friends of mankind, right? And I thought we should do something special, right? Besides, I had two reasons. The one reason was that I thought racetracks were way undervalued because they were in the middle of cities, right? So I said, oh, holy smoke, what an investment, the real estate. So for a while, I think it was maybe the largest city landowner in America, right? Because I had so many racetracks, right? My family has that racetracks now because, okay, that's another story. But so I saw the underlying value, the real estate. But then I became a bit sentimental, right? And I said, gee, I'd like to do something which honors the horse, huh? So I looked in pretty well all the horse books and all the horse stories I could find. Finally, I decided that the medical horse Pegasus, right? Okay, and so I designed. I made a few sketches. I hired somebody from Disney, then one of the great designers, and I said, "Look, I wanna create a bronze sculpture of Pegasus fighting with." I considered the horses. Call it the friends of man, and the dragons were the enemies of man, right? The man-eater, right? Okay, so he designed a Pegasus fighting with a dragon. We had some smaller sculptures, bigger sculptures, and they got bigger and bigger. I think now the sculpture is, I think maybe one of the largest in the world, maybe if not the largest. The horse is about 110 feet tall, the bronze horse, but then the dragon and the length is, I think the whole thing is about 300 feet, so it's gigantic, right?
It's huge.
Gigantic.
It's huge.
So basically, I wanted to create something where horse lovers would flock to, to see and honor the horse. As the Jewish people would flock to the Wailing Wall, as the Muslims flock to Mecca, and the Catholics to Rome, I was hoping that the people will flock to the Pegasus, and it's not quite finished because I had planned a museum, a horse museum, the history of horses, etc., and basically arouse the thing in people. Gee, we have been neglecting horses. They were our best friends. How can you neglect your best friends, right? So that's something that's still very important to me, and I hope to still have input to that subject.
No, you've grown quite sentimental and symbolically. I mean, that statue that you're referencing is, I don't know if you knew this, but it's actually the second largest in all of the United States, right behind Statue of Liberty.
No, I think it's larger than the Statue of Liberty because the bronze thing is nothing. It sits on a huge high concrete thing. I don't call that the sculpture, right?
Unbelievable.
It's a big square block.
Well, it's
right?
easier to get to and it's easier to see than it is the Liberty. That's for sure, the Statue of Liberty. But what I've noticed now as we begin to focus on where yours is, what I love about your symbolic stance, where you're getting sentimental in your wiser stage, not age, because you seem younger than ever. You're more vibrant than ever. You've kept in great shape. Taking on Canada as being the very first country with an economic charter of rights is no easy feat. And I just want to say this respectfully, at your stage and state in life, with the money you've made, the difference you've caused, and the philanthropy you've already funded, you can easily be on a beach somewhere in the world, just working on your tan, right? Enjoying the local cuisine with family and friends. I'm sure you can really truly retire and ride into the sunset, if it were, just like that cowboy movie that you once saw and were inspired to buy a horse from. Why take on such an effort like this one?
Well, it's, call it the world, the rules or regulations created by man and changed by man, right? And I said to G, rules and regulations, we're dominated by the golden rule, right? Okay, so it occurred to me, look, I've been blessed beyond, and I've always said it doesn't matter how smart you are. If the stars are not aligned, things don't work. And, in life too, it doesn't matter how smart you are. But without luck, right? Okay, sometimes the stars have to be aligned, right? That things work. So I've been very blessed that the stars have been aligned in many, many instances, and sometimes I'm it's getting deep in the side of you that you say, gee, how come you've been blessed so many, many times?
Well, you've got your eyes open and you're always growing and listening to what the world wants. But I want to just leverage this a little bit. You're right. When the stars are aligned, luck is in your favor, but you're also in the eye of the perfect storm. As we started this conversation with a Donald Trump serving his second term, and he's mobilizing billionaires into positions of power to reshape the economic future of America, Canadians are now rattled by the effects this government is having on Canadians nationwide. And they're all beginning to seek their own economic sovereignty, if it were. I'm inspired by the idea of doing the same and growing our independence far more than the dependence on America. With this all said, I know there's 7 principles behind the Economic Charter of Rights. What's the first one?
The first one is a country should not have debt. A country must have balanced budgets. And based upon that, I'm just using regular words, they might not be in today's language totally proper, but I'm saying a housewife, and there's nothing wrong with a housewife, right? It doesn't sound too good, a houseman, which looks but every housewife knows she cannot spend more monies than what her husband brings in. Otherwise, they wind up in a poorhouse. Every farmer knows he cannot spend more than he gets for his crops. Otherwise, he would lose his farm. And every small businessman knows he cannot borrow more than what the profits he creates. So it's only the politicians keep borrowing and borrowing, right? And there seems no end to it, and most of worrisome. It's such an important subject that we don't talk about it. How can we pay back? We have now about $2 trillion. There's no way, we leave our future generation with a gigantic mortgage, right? That's totally irresponsible. So number one would be, I kept only 7 principles, and I think they're easy to understand. So a country should not have debt, but again, I'm not trying to use a chainsaw approach. It's a very civilized approach. I'm saying we should write off 5% every year. So that means in 20 years, Canada would be debt-free.
No, I love how you've authored this. I mean, you're a member of the Order of Canada. You authored the Canadian Economic Charter of Rights and Responsibilities, not results, not psychology, not theorem. So the first of your 7 principles, if I may, is balance the budget and eliminate debt. Now, the second, which is to reduce government overhead and red tape. What does that mean?
What I mean, we have so many regulations. Let me give you a practical example. About 50 years ago, when the first computers came on the market, the slogan was, if you get one of those computers, you could eliminate a total office floor from one of those high rises. And now when I look around in the cities over the last 50 years, there's more than 20 times more office buildings. What do we do in there? We don't make products in there. It's regulations, regulations, regulations. We over-regulated. Our economic arteries are full with cholesterol, and the blood's not moving.
I mean, and this is what it means to reduce government overhead, reduce red tape, let enterprise get free again.
Yeah, but again, I'm saying in a civilized country, every citizen's got the right to find a job, whatever the openings are, right? So I'm not really condemning the bureaucrats, so it's their fault. It's the fault of the system we have to change. And again, I'm saying no bureaucrat has to worry to be fired, but there'll be a hiring freeze. So there'll be a natural, when bureaucrats retire, there won't be till we reach about the 50%, right? So again, we could 5% for 10 years, it's 50%, but then it's still too much. There was a recent survey done, right, on bureaucracy in different countries. Canada had 100 bureaucrats per 1,000 people. The United States had 70 bureaucrats per 1,000 people. Japan had 40 bureaucrats per 1,000 people. When I look back, let's say 50, 60, 70 years ago, Canada had perhaps maybe 10 bureaucrats per 1,000 people. I think maybe the right proportion would be maybe about 20%, right?
Well, this makes a lot of sense, and it's consistent with your third principle. And before I declare what it is, let me share something that you shared with me not so long ago in one of your articles where you wrote, and I quote, "Canada's personal income tax code has swelled. The code has swelled in size since it has first been introduced more than 100 years ago, ballooning from 6 pages to now over 3,200 pages a century later." This is speaking to the real point you've been making, which is it's just overcomplicated. It's bloated, the system itself. So the third principle to the Economic Charter of Rights is simplify the tax system. How critical is this, Frank?
This is very critical, right? The tax system is a great bearing. Our tax system is now, there's thousands and thousands of convoluted paragraphs, right? Nobody understands them. When I sometimes show people the paragraphs, even the best lawyers, I said, look, we can't say what it is. So what you have...
But Frank, can I interrupt for a moment and share with those who are listening and watching here? I have one of those paragraphs.
Yes.
I wouldn't mind sharing it because for those...
Maybe read that out loud.
Because I don't think anyone understands just how... Here, understand this. Check this out. Subsection 18.1. This is a real section from the Tax Act book, the one that measures over 3,200 pages. Subsection 18.1, subsection 10 applies where subsection A, a taxpayer's particular right to receive production to which a matchable expenditure other than an expenditure to no portion of which would, if this section were read without reference to subsections 18.1, subsection 7, and 18.1, subsection 10, be deductible under subsection 18.1, subsection 3. Have I lost you yet? In computing the taxpayer's income, relates has expired or the taxpayer has disposed of all of the right otherwise than in a disposition to which subsection 87-1 or 88-1 applies. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm confused. I was lost at subsection. Just the first word.
I had lunch with top lawyers and say, can you explain that to me? None of them can. Huh? And there's thousands of those in what we call the tax code. I could, basically what it boils down, those convoluted tax regulations serve special interest groups, which pay very little taxes or cannot be charged But I think because the paragraphs are laid out that it doesn't mean anything. You know, if in a criminal code, if there's a paragraph, it doesn't mean anything. How can he judge anybody, right? So really, I think the tax system favors special interest groups. So basically, I want to tell everybody, first of all, try to look at the book, see how convoluted it is, because 99.99% never seen the book, don't know how thick it is. So no country can function unless the people know what are the rules and the regulations. So it's totally convoluted. So I would recommend a black and white, where a high school student could fill out the income tax, and no more loopholes for special interest groups. You know, I thought it was kind of funny not that long ago, the great debate about capital gains tax. Look, I'm saying income is income is income. It doesn't matter where it comes from. And if you have more income, you should pay more taxes.
We're sitting here with Frank Stronach, billionaire, philanthropist, socialist, my friend, your friend, but now the man who is leading the charge as a member of the Order of Canada, a Canadian Economic Charter of Rights and Responsibilities. We've been talking about the principles so far, and just to recap, the first principle is to balance the budget and eliminate the debt. The second is to reduce government overhead and the red tape. The third is to simplify the tax system, which brings us to the fourth, which is quite, I have to tell you, is a real sigh of relief, especially as a small business owner. Tell me, what does it mean to you, Frank, to unchain small business?
Yeah, I will do it right away. But first, I want to correct you. You said socialist. I'm committed to social services. I'm committed to socially things which benefit people, but I'm not a socialist. The socialistic and communistic philosophies are based on wealth distribution. First, you got to create the wealth, otherwise there's nothing to distribute. So socialistic and communistic philosophies do not serve mankind, right? Okay, they serve special interest group. But by
the way, that was a test. I want to make sure you were paying attention, because if you just rolled over that one, I thought we're on autopilot here.
I don't want to get the reputation being a socialist, right?
This is the good news, by the way, on the edit. Just so you know, I want to interrupt to see if he was just listening to me truthfully, but and it was just good.
Okay.
Tell me about principle number 4, unchaining small business. What does that mean to you, Frank?
Basically, I'm saying, let me first, to bring about changes, timing has to be right. Timing is very important. Right? Timing, if you have a date, if you start a new on a new job, but timing is very important, right? And timing is, you can only change things in society if the timing is right. So timing, I'm saying, sadly, right, that the timing, the economy is going to be very bad the next 2 years, right? There'll be food shortages for a number of reasons. Food shortages because the United States is utilizing 120 million tons of grain to make ethanol, to keep the gasoline price low. But you can't do that anymore because there'll be food shortages, the Ukraine war, and the soil gets more diluted. We spray so much fungicide and pesticide, we kill all the bacteria and all the little creatures in the soil, and so the soil they're not that fertile anymore. The population is grown, so the next few years will be food shortages. So that is but coming back to basically, I say to small business, first of all, timing has to be right, and you can only change things if you got a constituency. The constituency would be small business. Small business has always been the backbone of a country. If small business does well, then the whole country would do well, right? Okay, so I'm trying to remind business, band together. If you band together, you can take off the red tape, because you're way over-regulated.
Yeah, no, and I love that. The fourth principle being unchained small business, it will make room for those entrepreneurs to make themselves more successful. And it gives rise to your fifth principle, which is that when you are more successful, share the profit with the employees.
Let me talk on small end because this is so crucial, right? In essence, what I'm saying is we should not destroy the capitalistic system. Okay? Small business could operate within the capitalistic system. What I'm saying is, and small business I classify as 300 employees per factory. What I'm saying is the capitalistic system needs harnessing when they grow beyond 300 employees, because then the owners, the entrepreneurs are not there anymore. You got professional management. They have no affinity for employees. People become a number in those large things. So it's so important to have free enterprise or the capitalistic system. Let the entrepreneur, they don't need the rules. They don't have to be governed by government, right? The taxman should have no business in a small business. So basically, I'm saying small business would be the constituency. If you band together, you could take off the red tape, and then you could also eliminate the business tax. Because small business doesn't make a lot of profit. Governments make more monies on taxes, the wage taxes, the income tax. So when small business wants to grow, so they rather hire one employee or more, right? And government makes more monies than if they pay a business tax. So the economy would just flourish and bloom, right? If we do that, right? And that's what we need.
And again, that gives rise to the fifth principle, which is to share profits with employees. If the small business owner is unchained and they make more money and share profits.
Okay. It's the small business. It's a very look. You as an owner have to know what it takes to run the thing here. You could pay a bonus if you want to. If you be smart, with a bonus or share profits or share shares or whatever. Let the entrepreneurs make 50 million or 100 million or even more. It should be like we need kids to say, I want to make them. Look, it's if you make more monies, you could be of greater service to society, to the country, or pursue things what makes you happy. So let it be, right? So it's very important that we must give them all the freedom, right? Right now, we got regulators breathing down the neck. If small business has a coffee or a cake or whatever, can you write it off? You got the tax inspectors. Get rid of that. And so when I said early on, 50, 60 years ago, when I built my first business, I just put a sign up and say open for business. I had no inspectors. When I built my second building, I got the permit within a day. You know, the townships were so helpful. They helped you. They say, did your blueprint get they be stamped by a qualified engineer because snow load is important, wind load, we want to see it safe. Well, that thing here, fine, he's got everything that's stamped. Start your business, okay? So we got to get back, right? That means we had a great concern on safety, on the environment, 50, 60. It was just a great country. So let's go back and learn that things work better, right? Because the living standards were at least 50% higher, right? So we gotta so it's so important that the small business will be, we're in the hands of small business where Canada will go. Without small business, so basically I talk to small business, look, you got kids. For the sake of your kids, and for the sake of the country, get involved in the Economic Charter. The Economic Charter, basically, it'll be very helpful for small business, for family farms, and for workers.
Let's pause for one moment. You're good. All right. When you say the term learn, I feel like that's an operative word because it gives rise to the sixth principle of the Canadian Economic Charter of Rights.
The fifth principle, I interrupted you quickly.
Well, but Frank, with all due respect, sharing profits with employees feels like it's a very nice yin and yang to unchain small business. Please.
The fifth principle is when companies grow beyond 300 people, then they would have to share the profits, anywhere between 5% and 20%. 5% for small company, when large company 20%. And so existing large companies are not affected by it, because it would create havoc. Because I just looking back, if I have Magna, right, I had a few 100,000 shareholders. If I would have said profit, like the market would gotten worried, but the shares goes down, etc., etc. So it's very so the existing large companies are exempt. Of course, they could, if they be good operators, they would share with the workers. They would get bonuses or maybe equity or profit sharing. But the law does not provide that. But the law will only set that when the small companies grow to a larger, they say, look, you got to share the thing now because you had a free ride. You did not pay a business tax. And now, but the business people would share anyway because they know the more you share, the more you get back from the workers.
And you witnessed this firsthand, especially when you built Magna from the first factory right through to your 40th and beyond, is that when you found managers who were capable and you made them owners and you gave the employees of those factories equity in those factories and by de facto Magna, that was really the essence of what made Magna so successful.
That was the key. That when I put in the corporate constitution, right, I think it was in the early 80s, our profits went up. The Constitution said, amongst other things, that workers get 10% of the shares over and above their wages. So the first year, our profits went up 40%, the second year, 100%, and the third year, 200%. And I said early on, that released by workers sharing in the profits, that released that energy of untold proportions, right? Because when workers know they get a slice of the profits, then they think differently. They're happy. They are, and that's so. Again, I want to speak loud out again. I'm not preaching to take away from the rich. No, I'm preaching without workers we can't make a profit. Let the workers participate in baking the economic pie. Everybody would get a bigger slice. Even the rich would make more money than do now, right? Okay, so that we got to see. Number 5, to share would be very important.
And to the fifth principle, before we move on to the sixth, that Magna was the first case study. It was the living demonstration of how that works when it works for all.
I think there were other small companies but none was done in such a classified way. In a very, we called Magna was more than a business. Magna was a culture. We called it the fair enterprise system. The basic philosophy in fair enterprise was the human charter of rights alone is not sufficient. We have to fortify it with an economic charter of rights. Economic charters of rights will lead to economic democracies, and economic democracies are the basis for democracy itself. You cannot have democracy unless you got economic democracy. But most of all, it would eliminate poverty. That's what it's all about.
And I love that you said that, because it's a wonderful segue to the sixth principle as you speak about economic democracy. Provide skilled trades training and apprenticeship. As a young dad, I have to admit, I've got a son who is in university, and I wish there was an opportunity for him to have gotten that training and get apprenticeship. You've often said that children in high school should have a year where they go off to trades, they go off to apprenticeship.
I go a little further, just as a practical advice. Look, in universities or high school and thing, kids, we don't learn kids anymore to drive a nail in a 2x4, right? They went just. So I'm saying kids, high school should stop at grade 10. And then grade 11 and grade 12, we should expose the kids to trades. That would be a win for the students, for the kids. Why? Because they get more knowledge. The more knowledge you have, the higher you pay. Okay, so it's a win for the student and it's a win for society because there's such a shortage on trade people, right? You know, if something doesn't work, you know, in your plumbing, on the electrical, you wait for days now. It's just so let it be kids which want to go to university after grade 12, right? They're free to go so, but a lot of kids might stay with the trades because it would be easier to create a business and you could make more monies, right? So I think it's a win for the students. They accumulate more knowledge. It's a win for society because we're short of trades. And the problem we have now is anytime there's a new building going up, it's a warehouse. Okay, we need where we make things, right? Okay, only when you make things, your living standards will go out. So we look down upon on tradespeople like you know, we say, look, you gotta have a university degree. But look, I know a lot of tradespeople. They fired a trade, they became billionaires.
No, it's true. And before we move on, I've interviewed you before where you've even cited that as an economy, and since we're talking about the Canadian Economic Charter of Rights and Responsibilities, being able to embolden our skilled trades, training, and apprenticeship puts our country in a position to build things again, to develop things again. Would you not agree with that?
Well,
statement?
it's a country which has great export and less import. They have a higher living standard, so it's very important. We gotta stay making things again. And I said, unfortunately, 50 years ago, Wall Street, the financial institutions, or Bay Street in Canada, was pushing higher wages, higher profits, right? And so business went to China, right? Business got to come back, right? And we got to start making things again. And via showing trade program, we can do that.
Well, in your seventh principle is it resonates with me most. I mean, as we've got a baby boomer in North America that turns 75 every 7 seconds, we realize that the importance of longevity, of wellness is so important. And I find it just so appropriate, Frank, that when you authored this Canadian Economic Charter of Rights and Responsibilities, that the seventh principle is the right to healthy food. Share with us why that was so important to you.
Well, again, about 12, 15 years ago, I said, Frank, you're doing something with the big cars, create a lot of greenhouse gases. It didn't quite sit right with me, huh? Okay, again, I don't want to be a hypocrite, right? It helped me make a lot of money, but I said to myself, Frank, you should do something which will benefit society better. So when I trying to pinpoint what I should do, many things went to my mind, and I questioned how come all the kids have allergies, right? Okay, that was a big thing here. And stage 2 diabetics, right, and autism. So I said, gee, maybe I should be in the agriculture. Maybe I should be in the business. The more I got into the agriculture, the more I could see this huge chemical jungle. When we think that 95% of the food eaten in North America comes from industrial farms. We got to realize in industrial farms, you see no more eagles fly. Why? There's no more rabbits. There's no more pheasants. We spray so much fungicide and pesticides, we kill practically everything. And kids and people breathe the air because that gets in the air as well. Drink the water, eat the food, eat the soil which gets contaminated. So I think it's the grown-up population is grossly negligent because we practically poison our kids, okay, because they all have allergies, stage 2 diabetics, etc. And over and above, you know, a kid which is not healthy doesn't grow up healthy. A kid which isn't healthy would have difficulty with learning activities, right? So most of all, he cannot be happy. So we gotta provide an environment that kids can grow up healthy and happy, right? Okay, so that is a very and call it the more rich people. They're rich because most of the time they think a little smarter. They realize they should eat organic foods, huh? And their kids get organic foods, right? But we want to have a society that kids and in the families where there's less money, the kids should have the equal chance. The kids should have healthy organic food. So basically, number 7 is no Canadian kid should go to school hungry. That means breakfast got to be served. No Canadian kid should leave school hungry. That means lunch has got to be served. And by law, the food had have to be organic. But when I got through all the thing, I realized there's a major problem. Countries which could feed themselves never had a problem. Canada did a great job feeding its people. It was family farms which did it, okay? So family farms now cannot compete with industrial farms. So family farms are practically on welfare. So we must create a family farm foundation. We must subsidize. If they grow organic, they get a subsidy. Now you would have some people cry out loud, we cannot afford that. We can easily afford it because the medical costs are billions more than a subsidy. And most of all, I think we got to make a major marketing program to get the kids back into farming. Right now, the family farm kids say, Mom, Dad, I don't want to be in the farming. I don't want to be in welfare. We got to get them in. It's cool. It's the most noble thing you could do when you feed people, right? So kids got to understand. And there's the greatest opportunity to create new foods with more holistic, give you more energy, more healthy, because the foremost Dr. Hippocrates, said hundreds of years ago, let food be your medicine, and medicine is your food.
I love it. At first, when you start talking about the Canadian Economic Charter of Rights and Responsibilities, it begins to sound like a movement, sounds like a mission. But it's very clear to me that it's actually your vision based on decades of experience and wisdom and collective knowledge, that after practice, rinse, and repeat, you've come up with a new master plan, if it were, for the future of Canada. And I have to say, Frank, I just want to acknowledge you for this level of courageous creativity to really care enough about the country you call home since 1954 to say that this country deserves better and this is the vision I have for it. Go forth and realize this new Canadian Economic Charter. And I've got to say, I'm not just moved, but I'm motivated to go out and champion this conversation, this new conversation about a better future for all those who call Canada home.
But you see, what amazes me, that we do not talk as a society. No place how important the economy is. It's without that is, you cannot feed the hungry. So the message I want to get, it's the clearest message people understand. If the economy doesn't work, nothing else will work. You cannot feed the hungry. You cannot look after the most fragile. So the economy. And the economy is driven by 3 forces. Workers, right? And it's so logical that and justice and fairness that workers should get a portion, right? Okay? Because, slaves didn't get a portion, right? Okay, that's why to a certain extent, we still treat the thing as slaves, right? I mean, we got, as I said, that society came a long way from the caveman to hunter and hunter to the kings and servants, and now we have companies with bosses, and that's being practically like a slave, right?
But you hit the nail on the head, Frank, in the closing moments we have in talking about the various principles about this new charter. You hit the nail on the head. Canadians have often been known as the 3 C's. We're cheap, we're conservative, and we're chicken. And no one wants to have the courageous conversation about what simply doesn't work about this country any longer, and just have the courage and the commitment to have a new conversation about what could it look like, working from a future vision and then working backwards from it. I mean, your background being someone who understands how to run a tool and die shop is all about systems. It's all about systems and making the best product for the best possible price. Why can't we create the best country for the lowest cost possible with a great impact for others? And I think that's the approach that you're using.
Yeah, we want to see this as a grassroots movement, right? We didn't touch. We could have maybe touched it. We could do it the next time. In essence, because timing is so important, and you need a constituency like small business. That how can we maybe the next time we should focus really what pressure can we put on to change the political system, to change it, right? Okay, and so we need. I'm saying the grassroots is every Canadian should be an ambassador to support and to incorporate in the Constitution the Canadian Economic Charter should be. And then we appeal to, look, if we got a little more time, maybe be a teacher, be a lead ambassador, right? Because it should be grassroots. Huh? I think the 7 principles are relative simple. They only based on economic matters, and I found we could get consensus on that, huh? Because if you got too much in a charter, you won't get consensus, huh?
Well, it's been said that what we view, we value, and what we value shapes us.
Yes.
So what you've created are 7 great values that we really all should and can embrace. And that's what we shall do. Just wanted to thank you, our viewers, our listeners, whether by podcast and or video, for joining me live and right here. Let me take that over again because I just said live. I wanted to thank you, our listeners, our viewers, for joining me in a conversation with our Frank Stronach. As you can see, there's so much conversation to be had, as there's so much work yet to be done. If there's any part of what we discussed, what we conversed about, or what was shared that really excites you, moves you, or perhaps even inspires you, I invite you to write Frank Stronach. Frank is willing and able to return your email, whether by data, whether by direct message, whether by email, or perhaps even text. Heck, you can even send him a handwritten note. No matter how you reach out to Frank, he wants to hear from you. So you are invited to not just join the conversation, but join his movement.